ministry referred to the incident as a rescue operation.
It's unclear whether Mexican security forces were caught in the act of trying to play up their crime-fighting role for political purposes, or whether this was simply an honest mistake. In any case, immigrants' rights organizations say this points to a complete lack of coordination.
A better approach, they argue, would be to integrate immigration policy throughout the region.
El fenómeno migratorio es un fenómeno regional.
Migration is a regional phenomenon. The Mexican, Central American and U.S. governments are all involved, but all of them are working on it on their own. This has to change. We have to start working together.
The incident comes amid rising tensions between Mexico and its Central American neighbors, whose government officials argue Mexico is not doing enough to protect immigrants from harm. The most violent incident occurred in October, when 72 immigrants were massacred. Mexican police blame it on a violent mafia organization called the Zetas. Central American governments quickly demanded that Mexico do more to protect immigrants crossing its national territory. According to Mexican authorities, some 20,000 undocumented immigrants were kidnapped by criminal organizations in 2010. Tuesday's official revelation from Guatemalan authorities will most likely add to the diplomatic tensions. But the real dangers facing tens of thousands of immigrants heading through Mexico on their way north will not likely stop them from making the journey. Frank Contreras, Al Jazeera, Mexico City.
Well, animal lovers took matters into their own hands after a whale became stuck in a fishing net off the coast of Mexico. The 30-ton humpback whale had been trapped for days and the Mexican Navy had been dispatched to help. But divers simply couldn't wait any longer. They used ropes and hooks to hold the whale in place so they could free it from the net. The underwater rescue operation took all of 30 minutes. This is Al Jazeera, and these are the stories making the headlines. At least 20 people have been killed and 22 others wounded in a suicide bombing in northwest Pakistan. The attacker, disguised in a school uniform, struck inside a military base in the Murdan region early on Thursday. Mass protests are continuing in Egypt for a 17th day. Thousands more workers are expected to go on strike looking for pay rises and government reforms. Negotiations for transition of power are still underway, but with no notable progress. As well as Liberation Square, hundreds of pro-democracy demonstrators are camped outside Parliament. Gathering outside parliamentary buildings are usually banned in Egypt, but the army is allowing access. And the newly appointed culture minister, Gaba Ashfor, has quit. His family say it's due to health reasons. But Egypt's main daily newspaper, Al Haram, says Ashfor, who's also a writer, was criticised by his colleagues for taking the post. Ashfor was the only new face in the new cabinet. The Philippines government has resumed peace talks with the Muslim separatists. The decades-long conflict in the country's south has pitted government forces against the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Talks between the North and South Korean military have broken down. Neither side could agree on the agenda for future discussions. Tension has been high on the peninsula since the North shelled a South Korean island in November, killing 4 people. Italian prosecutors are demanding Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi go on trial immediately. The call follows allegations that he paid for sex with a 17-year-old Moroccan dancer and then used his political power to cover it up. US President Barack Obama is gearing up for a battle as he gets ready to present his budget to Congress next week. Republicans have vowed to slash more than 60 government programs, but Obama says he needs to spend more to create jobs. In the latest poll, Americans give him low marks for his handling of the economy. The trial of Abu Bakr Bashir, the spiritual leader of al-Qaeda-linked Jamia Islamiyah network, has been postponed until Monday. Bashir was due in court on Thursday to face terrorism charges. The 72-year-old has already served time for conspiracy over the 2002 Bali bombings. If convicted, he could face the death penalty. There'll be more news at the top of the hour. Next, a nation in waiting.
The 6th of October, 1981. Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat, at the peak of his powers, celebrating the anniversary of the 1973 war with Israel. With all eyes turned towards the military parade, suddenly shots were heard. The president had been assassinated. The vice president, Hosni Mubarak, who had been sitting shoulder to shoulder with Sadat, was quickly pulled out from the chaos and escaped unharmed. Sadat's sudden demise would prove to be a pivotal point in Mubarak's career. Just 8 days later, he was elected president.
The transfer of power from Sadat to Mubarak did not happen democratically. It happened in a bureaucratic way. It was an inheritance of power.
Having ruled Egypt for 27 years, President Mubarak is now 80 years old. During his long life, he has been a witness to momentous events, both politically and socially. Yet for many of his compatriots, things have stayed the same, and Egypt remains a nation in waiting. Egypt, a nation of nearly 80 million, is today the most populous Arab country and one of the world's most ancient civilizations. For thousands of years, its people have been living peacefully as farmers, eternally attached to their Nile and fertile valley. From the fall of its pharaonic civilization at the hands of Persian armies in 525 BC until the end of British occupation in the mid-20th century, Egypt had been continuously governed by foreigners. Throughout this period, the Egyptian people were completely depoliticized, denied a say in their own affairs for so long.
Historically, the Egyptian citizen, and especially the farmer, has made a hidden pact with the government. I won't bother you as long as my livelihood is secure.
And it was against this backdrop, on the 4th of May 1928, that Mohammed Hosni Mubarak was born to a modest family in a poor village in the Nile Delta. From these humble beginnings, he rose to become a highly decorated pilot in the Egyptian Air Force. Consumed by devotion to his military career, it seemed Mubarak had no time nor interest in politics. And he had no involvement in the military coup, later known as the Revolution of July 1952, which overthrew King Farouk. The leader of the Free Officers movement, which carried out the coup, became revered as the first true Egyptian ruler since the time of the pharaohs. The Egyptian people were yearning for a leader of their own, and the charismatic Jamal Abdel Nasser captured their hearts and their loyalty.
Societies have always created their own heroes. When there is a need, one of its people will rise and lead their country to victory.
With the new leader came a new political system. A republic was declared in 1953. All political parties were disbanded. Egypt was to be a one-party state, and Nasser's decisions were to be unopposed. As the Egyptians began to witness the liberation of their country from British occupation, and with signs of Arab unity on the horizon, respect for their new leader grew. Respect turned to adoration for the man who made it his priority to empower the powerless, the laborers and the peasants. Under Nasser, Egypt cast off its capitalist system that had been in place up until 1952.
In the 60s, Egypt went through a period of imposing ideas like the nationalization of private capital and developing an economic system which depended on state ownership of production, which is the socialist system, or to be more realistic, the communist system.
Egypt was looking left, not only for its economic policies, but also for military support. It was during this period that Hosni Mubarak was sent to the Soviet Union to learn how to pilot the new Tupolev bomber planes that Egypt had recently invested in. Mubarak's career prospered throughout the 50s and 60s as he rose to become commander of Egypt's bomber brigade. His dedication to military service was complete, and he expected his staff to display the same single-mindedness.
He wanted people to do their job properly. If they made a mistake, he would confront them straight away. And if they repeated it, they would be punished. He's a patient man, but also decisive and doesn't let emotion get in the way.
President Mubarak did not have any kind of political or cultural background. He even hated reading newspapers, and it's well known that he despised seeing his officers read.
The 60s were an optimistic period in Egypt, but Nasser's regime was about to face a major blow, one that would obliterate Mubarak's bomber brigade. On the morning of the 5th of June 1967, in the southern city of Luxor, Mubarak witnessed a devastating Israeli aerial attack. An attack which was to destroy his bombers on the ground. It was only the beginning of what was to be Egypt's biggest military defeat in modern history, the Six-Day War. After the war, focus was immediately directed towards rebuilding the Egyptian armed forces. Egypt had suffered enormous losses of men, equipment and land, including the entire Sinai Peninsula. The Egyptian armed forces set about changing the whole chain of command which bore responsibility for the defeat. Their replacements were to be drawn from among the most loyal and professional. Egypt's worst defeat was about to turn into one of the biggest opportunities in Mubarak's career.
We were ordered to increase the number of pilots, and President Mubarak was chosen to lead the Air Force Academy because he was known to be exceptionally dedicated and loyal to his work.
In March 1969, and on a sudden visit